Welcome to the Technology Pulse podcast, hosted by DALY Computers, providing comprehensive technology solutions to the public and private sectors for more than 35 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Extreme Networks, delivering end-to-end, cloud-driven networking solutions and top-rated services and support to advance customers' digital transformation efforts and deliver progress like never before. And now here's your host, Rick from DALY.
All right, joining me today for the Technology Pulse podcast, we have Chad White and Dan Dulac from Extreme Networks. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Rick. Great to be here.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Now, Extreme Networks has been a great partner of DALY, but we, of course, want to give those who may not be too familiar with Extreme, or even those who are familiar with Extreme, but you want to let them know about a little something new, we're going to give them the opportunity to learn a little bit more about that. So, Chad, give us the elevator speech. What is Extreme Networks?
Extreme Networks is a networking hardware and software equipment manufacturer. We've been around for 30 years now.
Yeah, since 1996. Yep.
Oh, so really almost 30 years. We play mainly in the switching and routing, and then also the management solutions, the software solutions for managing those products. And we have employees and offices all over the world. We have customers that span all verticals, from the smallest mom and pop shops to Fortune 50 companies and everything in between.
And Chad, what is it that you do at Extreme Networks?
So I am the regional director for our Mid-Atlantic state, local, and education practice. So for Extreme Networks, that's Maryland, Virginia, DC, Delaware, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And we affectionately call that SLED in IT world parlance.
Yes. And of course, our customers are SLED organizations and others within Maryland and Virginia. And then Dan, tell us a little bit about what you do at Extreme Networks.
Sure. So a little bit of history. I've been in the networking industry my entire career. I started right out of university with Cabletron Systems in 1996. So that ages me, but came to Extreme via the Enterasys acquisition in 2013. And Enterasys was one of the spin-out companies of Cabletron. So that kind of is a quick synopsis of how I arrived. And so my role is Vice President of Solution Strategy, including our channel engineering team. So I lead and manage our America's channel team, working much closely with channel partners just like yourselves to make sure, we're supporting you, your teams, your customers as they try what we like to call new ways with better outcomes. And that's kind of the marketing pitch, so to speak. So I'm excited on this podcast to really kind of probe into that and talk about some of the unique and different things we do to drive newer and better outcomes for certainly our SLED customers, but really any of our vertical industry customers.
Now, it's interesting, Dan, you touched upon something that I think is really near and dear to me. And I think something that a lot of our customers don't really grasp sometimes, which is outcomes rather than outputs. Because a lot of times, particularly in the technology space, you look at outputs. How fast are my routers working? How, quickly can I download something? How quickly can I upload something? So you're looking at outputs.
Correct.
So give us a little bit of a distinction between an output and an outcome when it comes to networking.
Yeah, good, and you nailed it, Rick. The outputs, and we talk about this all the time, and we actually try to shy away from this, which is more of call it a speeds and feeds conversation. Extreme Networks, including, 7 or 8 other major vendors that are out there that we compete against, we all sell speeds and feeds. We all sell the same stuff. Now, we play leapfrog with one another. We might come out with a 6 gigahertz access point 2 or 3 months ahead of a competitor, but they quickly catch up and vice versa. So it's this constant game of leapfrog. And from our perspective, the speeds and feeds is just table stakes. Everybody can provide it. You can buy that from anybody. You can probably buy it more cheaper from maybe an international company versus Extreme, but we're about the value and really helping drive the outcome. So some good examples of outcomes, certainly from a SLED standpoint, is how can we use the infrastructure as a a key strategic differentiator for our SLED customers, for a higher education or K through 12 school. Meaning, you dig into that, and then you think about, well, what's an outcome of a school? Well, it's to create better student experiences. It's to create a more immersive learning experience. It's to allow students to take the technology they're using in school and perhaps take it home so they can do schooling at home and extend that experience on how they can use technology to receive a better education, to learn, to try, to experiment. We all know technology is pervasive. It's everywhere. And so part of what Extreme, we're maniacally focused on is how do we use the technology we can provide to really create that outcome that is measurable. Chad, you live and breathe in this every single day, but it's really about, can we create better experience for not only students, but for faculty, staff, teachers, so they can better use technology to deliver a better teaching experience. So there's a lot nested up into this. And Chad, you might even have some examples off the top of your head where clearly when we're driving outcomes, there's clear outcomes when it comes to using Extreme's technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And you nailed it as well on that. When I talk with customers and my team about it, it's like this. If you're the network manager at a school district or for a local county government, a university, no superintendent or, city manager or president of the university has ever come to a network manager and said, you know what, I think you really need to push more data through those switches, because, and so here's $1 million to go do that. Why don't you improve the speed of how everything's going? They never say that. What they do is they come and they say, hey, I've got a board meeting and the vendor that we had to come in and tell us about tax policy couldn't connect to the internet from the network, or things were slow, or they were having a problem. Or I went to this conference and this brand new system that I'm all excited about. I want to deploy it. Can we turn that on? Can we hook that up? And so a network administrator's job is to be ready for those things, and is to be able to provide the tools to solve those problems that the customers have, that the leaders have, that the end users, ultimately the customers of that entity, so the citizens of a county or the students of a college or a school district, so that they get what they need, which is the learning outcomes, or they're protected on the streets by the police force who can respond more efficiently to a call, everything like that. And so we really try to focus on not just how big is our box compared to somebody else's box, or how new is our box, or how innovative is our latest solution, but what problems are we solving that our customers are experiencing?
So that leads me to an interesting question. Do you often find that you're coming in when there's a problem rather than coming in and offering a proactive solution? Is that often a challenge where somebody's mad before you even walk in the door, and they're not mad at you, but you're trying to come in and really fix a problem rather than come in on the front end and say, hey, we know things are going well now, but here's what you should be looking at 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the line, where we can really take things that are going okay and make them go from good to great?
That's a great question. And I would say it's both, but it depends really on the type of customer. The customer, the IT department that's focused on the outcomes, they're thinking into the future, and they're thinking, okay, not just is everything running today and am I free from people screaming at me, but they're thinking what might somebody need in the future, and they're keeping up with their refreshes, and they're keeping things current, and they're learning and interacting with us and others about the latest technology. And with those customers, and they exist not just as Extreme customers, but also with our competitors. So with those customers, it's often coming in and saying, hey, how are things going? And what do you see coming on the horizon? And, here's here's our latest technology, and here are the solutions and the problems that we see coming in the market that are going to require these maybe 3 years down the road. How can we help you get a plan to get ready for that? But then we also have customers that are exactly like you said. They're the ones who they've been trying to keep the proverbial lights on for a while. And now all of a sudden the lights are still on, but the customer needs to do something that goes beyond what those lights can illuminate. And the network's not ready for it. And then it becomes a fire drill and somebody's under the gun. Other people are upset. And so we find ourselves in those situations as well.
How do you handle that when you're coming into a scenario where, like you said, things just aren't running well, and you're trying to deal with somebody who knows when their last purchase might have been? It might have been 3-5 years ago. It might have been 6-8 months ago, and they just bought the wrong stuff. I mean, how challenging is it to deal with that type of situation?
Well, it depends on whether I sold them the stuff 3 years ago.
Who's on the hook?
That's right. If I sold them the stuff 3 years ago and now it's not working, then then it gets harder. Now, really, what it's about, it's finding out, okay, what is the pain point? Why are they having trouble? Why are they upset? Why is whatever they bought maybe not too long ago from Extreme or from somebody else, why isn't it getting the job done? And really, it often I'd say a lot of the time it comes down to something related not just to the speeds and feeds of the gear, but to the efficiency, the ability to roll something out, or in today's day and age, the security. It's going to be, we've got somebody, well, let me say it this way. The network, more and more things are connecting to the network every day. I mean, if you have access to your home router and you can look at all the devices that are connected to your home internet, it blows many people's minds away how many devices a typical home is connected.
I've got 40 at my house, Chad. 40.
Yeah. I think I have at least that many at my house too, with myself and 2 kids that are still at home.
Yep.
Well, at an enterprise, it's even more. I mean, because everything, you have lights that are connected to the network, and that helps automate things and save electricity. You have, building controls, you have video surveillance cameras, you have phones, you have, obviously laptops, computers, mobile devices, and everybody's got 4 or 5 that people want to connect their watches to the network at work nowadays. But what is difficult is managing that balance between the flexibility to give the organization the new stuff that they want to connect, but then do it in a way that doesn't take hours and hours of man time or woman time, configuring the network, and yet doesn't sacrifice security as well. And that's really often, it's those 2 places, the efficiency. How do I get this done with all the requests I have coming at me? And how do I do it in a way that doesn't compromise security? Because often networking teams have a parallel security team in the organization that is going to conferences, keeping up with the latest stuff, and then making demands on the networking organization related to security as well. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add on that, Dan?
Yeah, Chad, you summarized it well. That really is, if I was to summarize what you just said, it's like, how do we offer SLED any customer who has what I call lots of transient users and devices coming and going? And by the way, brand new kinds of devices. When I think of a K-12 or university, that is the industry, the vertical. They see the newest, latest, greatest tech before anybody else, because all the kids come home after Christmas and holidays with these brand new widgets they got for Christmas, right? So it's always the latest and greatest tech. And so obviously the institution needs to provide seemingly open, simple access, but yet it has to be secure at the same time. And those 2 concepts, as you illustrated, Chad, are at odds. If the security guys had their way, everything would be locked down and we'd be back to the sneaker network. You want to talk to somebody? Pick up the phone. Don't text, call, right? Those kinds of things. But that obviously won't work in today's day and age. So it is a constant and a very fine line between the open, easily accessible, fast, flexible network access while maintaining a level of security that is unforeseen, unseen, unfelt. Because the more security parameters you put in place, the more you risk that user experience. I've got to authenticate 10 times a day. Well, that stinks. I've got to jump through hoops to get online, multiple passwords, codes. Well, that stinks. And so that's why we see a lot of biometrics today, Face ID, thumbprints, because that's a very easy, unobtrusive way to kind of, put some security parameters in place. But no doubt, this is a struggle that will happen as long as technology is around, is that, open yet secure. And how do you do it? What's the right balance? And so companies like us, this is what we work on and think about every single day in the space.
And Dan, I want to ask you, when you're having these conversations with SLED organizations, obviously these conversations have to go deeper than the end user.
Yes.
And when you're having these conversations, because obviously the folks who are the final decision makers are not the technical side of things. You're talking about folks in procurement. You're talking about, sometimes it's a CFO, sometimes, a CEO, depending on the type of organization. How do you tailor those conversations to somebody who doesn't understand what the switches and all of the technical, it's funny because I've been listening to an audio book from someone who was in the Star Trek universe. And she basically said, I had to say a lot of technobabble. And technobabble is a word that I've now come to really love and appreciate. How do you cut through all of the technobabble to have those conversations with people who aren't technical?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rick. And it's one that my approach and technique is to learn and speak the language they know. So if we're talking to a CFO, clearly we all know CFOs are looking at cost optimizing everything, everything. And so if we can tie back how an extreme network solution technology can cost optimize, either it be by process, simplifying how the network is managed, maintained, secured, taking cost out of the physical infrastructure to do that. Cost optimizing resources. A lot of times, and this is something else, Chad, I think you would agree, we never hear, hey guys, it's great to meet you from Extreme. I'm so excited because I got new headcount coming into my IT team next year. We never hear that. It's in fact either flat or the opposite. The IT teams are being asked to reduce their costs. So how do you do more with less? Right. And so I guess to your point, Rick, that's really the key. If I'm talking to, the head of, whether it's a CEO, CFO, head of operations, I try to articulate the value we can bring in a language they understand, right? That they can kind of quickly grasp. Because the technology bits, like the techno jargon, that's just how we do it, right? That's down the road. We have to get into that discussion, but why we're doing it is the key, right? And if we can put that in the language of a CFO, something they understand, that's when we have really rich conversations and it can help solve their problems, really.
Well, and we have to be skilled at telling customers and decision makers, why does this box and this widget and this piece of software that we sell, how is it going to keep your organization out of the news because you had a data breach? How is it integrate with other products that help do that? How does it make it so that when, those students that come back to their dorms, if they're, at a college campus and it's January after Christmas and they want to hook everything up, how does what we're selling keep you guys from getting tweet storms about how horrible the administration is at this place because, none of the technology works, and things like that. And if we can't connect those dots and help people see, and then do it in a way that is technically correct and accurate and honest and will be backed up by the network guy or the wireless guy or the security guy who runs this stuff, then we're not doing our job the way we're supposed to do it. So the SE organization, like what Dan helps run for our channel partners, and the sales organization that I help run in the Mid-Atlantic, we partner together and do exactly that. That's the goal.
And ultimately, Rick, what we try to do, because we've been talking about end users and outcomes and so forth, but our buyers and the network administrators, they're users too, just in a different capacity. So we always think about, well, how do we make their lives easier too? We want the quality of life of our network operators, our engineers. We don't want them getting that, midnight call on a Saturday or Sunday night, right? We want the network to be automated. We want it to be secure. We want a level of a quality of life and a level of comfort there where they can have a life too. Because the pressures that pile on top of a network outage of any sort, even a perceived network outage, when the network isn't out. In fact, you may have had this experience in your own personal lives. I'm on the road traveling, and I get this frantic call from my daughter, my wife. Hey, the network is down. I'm sorry, the internet is down. Internet is broken. Like, well, no, it's not the internet. I'm pretty sure it's not the internet. It might just be your device or something on our network at home or something, right? So, but these are the calls that anybody in an institution will make or create help desk saying, hey, from their viewpoint, the internet is down, right? And so how do we quickly identify root cause and fix those issues as quickly as possible? And that's on the onus of the network teams that we're helping build these technologies and support. We're helping them do that faster, better than anybody else in the marketplace, which leads to a better quality of life. So that's something we talk about all the time as well, is how can we streamline an IT operation to make, at the end of the day, their quality of life better. And if we can do that, everybody wins.
So you bring up a really good point with that. Other than giving me really bad flashbacks of pretty much every time I have ever been traveling, as I'm driving down the road, getting those frantic texts from my teenager and my preteen that, just like you said, the internet is broken because they can't get on their gaming computer and play Roblox, which
Right.
to me sounds like a blessing more than a curse. But
I'm with you.
I can understand how that would be bad for them. So you've talked about the fact that you've never really seen these types of departments grow. It's always everything's shrinking, everything's consolidating. You have people who are wearing multiple hats, and they don't want to get that call, but if they do get that call, how does Extreme help them deal with that?
Great question. I'll take a first swing, Chad, and then you can add some color of anything I miss. So one of the unique things we bring to the market for this very reason you call out, Rick, is we have the industry's only 100% in-source service and support. So when a customer, a partner picks up the phone in these dire needs, I need help, the person at the other end of the line is a badged Extreme employee. And we have a very interesting statistic in that it's called first person resolution. 94% of the time, when our TAC is called for a help desk ticket, 94% of the time, that issue is addressed and solved by the person who answered the phone. 94% of the time. So we have, on average, I think we're at about 12-year average tenure of our TAC engineers. So very skilled, know our technology back to front, front to back, including other products, vendors, technologies too. That's how skilled they are. And so that's kind of our first line of defense. Now, I'll be honest with you, that's a model that we've seen in other industries. Companies, to save money, outsource support. When you call a TAC, you're receiving somebody in a different country or who's a contractor. They're not even working for the vendor who you're looking to get support for. That is very frustrating. And that is something that, we believe to provide the best support, we need to own and be accountable for the support engineering, the support organization. And so that continues to be a differentiator for us because we know there is no bug-free technology. There is none. And the real question is, how do you respond when there is a problem? And so we believe this to be the best way to do that is invest in and own our support, our global support, 24/7, 365, and that's how we do it. We support our partners the same way. So it's something we're proud of, and it's a test. Every day is a test, no doubt. Don't get me wrong; it's not easy, but we stand behind it.
So no Chat GPT.
Well, I wouldn't say no. I'm sure there's people trying to figure that one out for sure. Yeah. I've tried it. I've tried it. So yeah, it's a tool. It's another tool in our tool bag.
It is a tool. It is a tool.
So even if they're using Chat GPT, at least they're using it for a good reason, a good cause. So
Yeah,
you're not getting somebody who's just reading the same information off the support page, because I had that nightmare recently. So
I was just going to say, I mean, Dan, when he introduced himself, talked about being within the Cabletron and Terraces Extreme family since '96. I came into the Extreme family later. I've been here 5 years and worked in the networking industry for several years before then, and mainly working with resellers that were selling, products that are competing to Extreme. And when I first came on board with Extreme and started meeting customers, I was shocked as I went around customer to customer, introducing myself, getting to know the customers in the territory I had at the time, how many of them went out of the way to tell me how they really loved the support at Extreme Networks. And I had thought, and during the hiring process, I thought, okay, there's some marketing mumbo jumbo that everybody, they splash across the webpage. But having been here 5 years, our customers really do believe it. And, that doesn't mean we don't make mistakes and that we don't get it wrong sometimes, but it really is a differentiator, and we work hard. And Dan said it, it's, if you're a type of person that just expects everything to work every time and nothing ever to go wrong, then I feel sorry for you, because you live your life pretty disappointed, because nothing works all the time, every time. There's always issues. And so it's about, how do people respond? How do companies respond when there's a problem? And that goes, our support center. And then also we have a highly accessible field teams as well. So when our customers have issues, we have field teams that they know who they are. And we have field partners like DALY Computers, and they can get connected to somebody who can get them with the right person very quickly and very efficiently. That's how we deal with it.
And let me just say, I find the honesty of your statements very refreshing, because I have to say, as a consumer myself, when someone says nothing will ever go wrong, we always know what we're talking about, we always know what we're doing, we never make mistakes, you are going to be 100% satisfied, I immediately want to go running in the other direction, because it's just not human nature. It's just not the nature of anything. So hearing you have that human element to you, again, to me, is extremely refreshing, something that hopefully people appreciate as you're talking to them, because you're not trying to sell them on something that is fantasy rather than reality.
And honestly, Rick, as we're talking to prospective clients, selling the service and support element is hard because they've never experienced yet. So it might sound like lip service. So you only know how good it is when you experience it. Well, in order to experience it, you have to have a problem. And as part of the sales process, you don't want to sell the fact that you're going to run into problems with the technology, right? So it's this weird kind of chicken egg situation. But I'll tell you what, the best way we combat that is we try to get our existing customers to talk directly with a prospective customer, and then all these issues go away, because there's unbiased opinions there. And an existing customer can explain, to Chad's point, that they're very keen on singing the praises of our support. So if we can get an existing customer to talk to a prospective customer or client, that's usually the best way to kind of get that message across, to help them see the light, if you will.
So we've been talking about what is, and again, the different challenges that SLED organizations have. Now, I know you were talking before about, remind me the phrase that you used, speeds and feeds, right?
Feeds and feeds. That's right.
Speeds and feeds. So when you're talking about speeds and feeds, obviously, like you said, it's always this constant leapfrog game. But tell me about what's new and what's different when it comes to networking, because again, a lot of people don't have this type of knowledge. I mean, yes, I set up a network in my house because I put little Google pucks around my house, and my kids don't complain that they can't go into a room with their iPad and it just stops working for them. But how have things changed? What are we looking at? Because there's a term that I've heard, but again, I don't want to try to sound like I'm knowledgeable about any of this, but the term I've heard is fabric. And so that's something I want to delve into just a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about, is this the newest, the latest, the greatest, and how is it different?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rick. And let me step back and give a little context before I answer your question direct. So when you think about, this kind of goes to the previous dialogue we've been having around the IT teams, the resources. Not only are the investments fairly flat, if not on the decline as far as human resource to support these growing networks, but we're also seeing a skill set challenge, meaning, and you said it, Rick, IT engineers are being asked to not only manage the network, they got to manage the applications, they got to manage the security. They're wearing multiple hats. And so imagine trying to be an expert at every one of those things all the time, giving the rate of change of this technology. It's extremely difficult to do. And so there's a huge emphasis, certainly at Extreme, of how do we create more of a consumer-based management approach? How do we make management so simple and easy that you don't have to be an expert, right? You can continue to wear your multiple hats while maintaining a world-class infrastructure. And so we're using things like cloud technologies and cloud applications so that you just go to a web browser. You don't have to install an app locally. You don't have to manage the app. You don't have to patch it. You don't have to secure it. None of that. It's all done automatically for them because it's a cloud-based application. That's kind of one area. You brought up, Rick, another key area, which is the infrastructure itself and this concept of a fabric network. And if you think about just going back to how that name even be, think of in your mind a piece of fabric where you have threads that are just woven and interconnected so tightly together that it creates a sheet of fabric, a piece of fabric. But when you peel it back, it's all these threads that are all woven and interconnected. That's exactly kind of the concept of a network. You want every network device to be connected to every other so you can create the shortest path for data in a packet to go through, which creates the highest speed, which creates the best user experience, right, at the end of the day. So this idea of creating a network fabric kind of is the means to that end. Now, as you can also imagine, you look at a little piece of fabric, thousands of pieces of thread in just a little 1 inch by 1 inch square. So very complicated, very complex. So that's the other side of a fabric. Well, how do you do that for all the positive reasons I mentioned while driving simplicity? How do you do that? And so with Extreme, we call it our campus fabric solution. What we do is we've learned from multiple years of industry, of history, not to get too technical, but the kind of the tried and true method of building a network is usually what we call a 3-tier architecture. Your edge of your network, that's where your users gain access through wireless access points or switches, wired switches. That data then funnels up into a distribution tier of the network. That's the second tier. And then your third tier would be your core or data center tier, which could reside in the cloud or on premise, doesn't really matter. But that's the traditional way. And that's done with VLANs, that's done with routing. It's secured through things like ACLs. Certainly a lot of your listeners who are familiar in this space will understand these concepts because it's been around for 40, 50 years, as old as the Ethernet network has existed. We take a different approach with Fabric in that we abstract the physical, call it connectivity, that wired mesh. Again, in your mind's eye, think about how all these switches are connected together. We abstract that physical connectivity from the applications that we're delivering across that connectivity. So for example, with call it the 3-tier architecture, if a network administrator wants to roll out a new service, like say, wants to create a network segment that is specific to VR, virtual reality for a classroom. We need certain attributes of that service. We have to assign certain bandwidth, certain security. In order to do that in a traditional 3-tier infrastructure, you've got to configure the edge switches. You've got to configure the distribution switches with the VLANs. You've got to configure the routing. How are you routing that traffic up through the core of the network and out to the internet and back again? So you're touching every single switch at every single layer, all 3 tiers, to make that change. Now, remember, we are talking about a group here who doesn't have a lot of resources, don't have a lot of time. And by the way, every time you make a change, there's a point of human error. Every switch I touch, every config parameter I touch, all the way up the stack and down again, is fraught with potential human error, which causes outages, which we don't want to happen. And so contrast that now with the fabric. So when we have a fabric deployed, the only thing the administrator must configure is what service do they want to create, and they define that service at the edge through a user interface, a very simple user interface. All my classrooms, all my locations, my entire edge, I want to create this new service. You push a button that says deploy this service, and then the fabric itself teaches itself through the entire web, if you will, of that service, and every switch along a path knows what to do with that traffic. So it's way lower touch point. You can spin up a service very, very fast, and it's not fraught with human error because it's literally a couple of mouse clicks, and the user interface itself will prevent some of those configuration errors in and of itself. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand it a little bit, kind of contrast with what the kind of traditional network versus what a fabric network can do. It's very service oriented. Think about what a service provider would do. You ring up your local service provider. What they're using on the back end to provision your home internet service is fabric-based technology. It's what we call IP fabric, which we have in our portfolio as well, but it's more of a service provider-based solution. Whereas what we're talking about here specifically is what we call our campus fabric, which is a layer 2 or Ethernet-based fabric that we see in enterprise environments. But it's the same analogy. That's where the learnings came from, is how do we give our customers that service provider-like simplicity, flexibility, and security without, them having to spend a ton of money and, these ISP class of devices. They don't have to worry about that. It comes, with our enterprise class technology. So some people think fabric is an all or nothing. I need to upgrade my entire network to deploy Extreme's fabric, and that's just not the case. So our fabric can interoperate with Cisco, Juniper, anybody, right? And you just do it in pieces. I said a lot there, Rick. I'm going to pause. Chad, I don't know if there's anything you want to add as far as some of how you've realized some of the value in some of our customers today.
Well, I was going to add on to your example too, the security side of it as well. Some rolling out a new service. You mentioned, the word VLAN or something like, a new segment, that a special segment. Well, in today's world, more and more security professionals are putting pressure on the network team to go to a more complicated architecture that used to be reserved for big, large organizations, where they have not just segments within the same level, but layer 3 virtual VRFs, they call them. People will know what that means. And then those things are protected from each other, even not just by the network, but by a firewall and different technology. And so when you add that layer of complexity in, it makes rolling out a new service even more difficult for the network team. And the security concerns in today's world are making that kind of a model more and more common, even for smaller and smaller organizations. And then back to the team that hasn't gotten any bigger, and already has to do more and more. Now they have to learn something that used to be reserved for one special routing segment of a major company or large university's team. All they did was the complicated routing and connections to the firewall and all that kind of stuff. Well, now more and more people are being required to do that. And so making that change and rolling out that new segment and complying with all the security protocols that are being put on them by the security industry is hard. All of that gets simpler with a fabric network.
Yeah, Chad, you mentioned the word segment. That is, when you talk to a CISO or a security expert from their perspective from how to secure a network, that's the terminology they use. How do we segment the traffic as tight and narrow as possible to shrink the threat landscape as best as we can? Right. And so by its nature, the fabric is at what we call a hyper segmentation. It hyper segments traffic for that very reason, for the security. So if an infiltrator gets in, they can't see anything. There's no next hop attack that they can go. It's, in fact, every customer conference that we do, we actually have a hackathon event where we challenge our customers and our partners who, could be ethical hackers or they're trying to break, the network. We actually challenge them to break our fabric, try to break into it. And we have a big $25,000 check that we like to give away that we still have. And it's collected a lot of dust over the years because we haven't found anybody who's been able to break into it, which is, knock on wood, a great thing. So, we're pretty confident in the fabric tech. And by the way, customers who haven't experienced it, and then they do, it's one of those things where they cannot believe how simple it is. And that's probably one of the biggest takeaways. And one of the joys in my job is when I see that light bulb come on from a user who's used to the traditional 3-tier, working with VLANs, working with routing, VR, all this stuff, and then they come and test an Extreme Campus Fabric solution. That light bulb goes on, and it's so inspiring to see because the world can be simpler. Their lives can be simpler. And once they experience it, there's no going back.
I have to say, I have always loved those light bulb moments.
Yes.
Those were always a favorite of mine, particularly when I was in the education sector, to have those moments where somebody would have that light bulb moment. That really was something that
it fuels your fire for days and if not weeks. It's amazing to see. It's one of the most rewarding things for sure.
It is pretty wild. I mean, when we talk about our fabric technology with prospective customers, the pattern usually goes, we're explaining it and they're kind of looking at us saying, huh, okay, maybe nodding their heads. Then there comes a moment where they kind of frown. They're looking a little bit perplexed or disappointed or they're become disagreeable and almost to the point where they're arguing with it, like, no, this doesn't work this way. It's impossible. It can't be that simple, everything like that. What we then often do is we'll have, somebody from Dan's team or one of our other engineers do an actual workshop with them where we bring in a few switches or we can do them virtually and we let them log into the interface and we take them through a series of steps that any competent network engineer is going to understand what's happening. And every single time they have those light bulb moments.
That's right.
And
it's almost automatic.
Then, they're like, what? And they see how it works. And to Dan's point, it's pretty neat when you see that happen. And then they start figuring out how to get their bosses to buy it.
That's right.
It's kind of how it works.
Yeah. Rick, I find myself, if I'm feeling down in my job or I don't know, it's the middle of winter here in New England and I'm just not in a good mood, I look for the nearest fabric workshop and I get my butt there because because I know I'm going to see light bulbs come on. And again, that just fuels my fire. So it's fun.
I have to say that the fact that, everything that you've talked about with this fabric is thrilling to me. Again, trying to think in the bigger picture of things and trying to put myself into the shoes of somebody who's got this. But I mean, what's the deployment like? Is it an all or nothing type of thing? You have to completely wipe out everything and start over, or how does that work?
Well, no. It's not that. That's not the. It's much simpler and easier than that. And you know, one thing about Extreme, we're all we do is networking, and because all we do is networking, and we're also not. I mean, just reality. We're not yet. I'll say yet the biggest networking provider in the industry. So every time we sell something new, we have to integrate with and or replace somebody else's products, a competitor's products. And it's very rare that we come in and just do a complete forklift upgrade. We love that and it's fine. And we're able to do it well. But the beauty of Fabric is that we can integrate in and provide value for, just the remote sites or just one or two different types of services that a customer is having problems with on their network. And we can tunnel through, we can give customers the benefit of the Fabric, even if they're keeping the majority of their infrastructure the same. It really doesn't matter what brand, what manufacturer the rest of that infrastructure is, because all of our gear, and including all of our Fabric gear, which is part of our universal switches now, but it communicates on standard protocols as well. So we can always make those tie-ins and those plugins.
I talked about the traditional 3-tier architecture. That's usually what we're coming in to augment or replace when we put a Fabric in. But to Chad's point, a traditional 3-tier can interoperate and coexist with a Fabric network, right? So it is not all or nothing. And again, usually the case is a customer will start with a small piece of their network, move it to Fabric, and then over time, just extend and expand their Fabric. As budget allows, as time allows, as maintenance windows allow, et cetera, et cetera. So one piece, Rick, back to your question too, is and Chad, you struck a chord with me on this one. Is historically we've called our Fabric Campus Fabric for obvious reasons because it was kind of a campus-based technology. Well, given what we've all seen and learned with the pandemic, and even my local office here in our corporate office here in Salem, New Hampshire, we went one office of 500 employees to 500 offices of one employee each. And imagine the challenge our IT team has in how do you maintain and secure and provision, the data and access when everybody's either working in different offices or from home. Right. And so these are real challenges every business around the world is working through right now. And so what we've done on the topic of Fabric is not only is our campus Fabric purpose built for campuses, but we've created a technology via SD-WAN where we can extend that Fabric to any remote site, literally unlimited scalability back to that one office of 500 versus 500 offices of one each. We can scale, and so from a deployment and management perspective, that still looks like a single Fabric. Even though there's 500 disparate locations, that could be 500 nodes on a single campus. From a management standpoint, it's the user workflow, how it's operated, how it's maintained is the same. It just happens to be a highly distributed Fabric versus a localized one. And so, some of these advancements, we're really putting some investments and advancements into this Fabric technology to extend its capability, given this new world order that we're all in, this post-pandemic world. So it's pretty exciting stuff.
Fantastic. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we let people know is that there's somebody that they can talk to. You talked about this a little bit before when you were talking about support, but when you're talking about bringing a solution like this on, again, this isn't a quick conversation. This isn't a 5-minute, I'm going to go on Amazon and I'm going to order network. It doesn't quite work that way. So if somebody wants to have the conversation, if somebody wants to talk this out, they want to have you look at what they currently have and see where you can take where they are now and take it to where they want to be. Can they get in touch with you to have those conversations?
Absolutely. That and I would say that's where our channel partners like DALY Computers come in as well. So, there's more of you out there running around the Mid-Atlantic than there are, Extreme employees. And we have a great relationship with DALY Computers. You guys are one of our best and biggest partners in the region. And so every one of the DALY reps that your customers that are listening know, and hopefully if they don't know, they can easily find one of you, can get our customers in touch with the Extreme Networks team that is covering them and can answer the questions and do whatever analysis and work in conjunction with the DALY team to get that done.
And I would add my perspective, being a technologist and a propeller head, so to speak, the proof is in the pudding. If you heard anything today that piques your interest, you want to see something in action, and as a technologist, I don't believe it till I actually see it and I could put it in my hands and experience it myself. Again, that light bulb moment, I encourage you to, again, reach out to the DALY team who can get in touch with us. We can do personalized demos. We can do workshops. We can do all kinds of things, because I'm telling you, it will feel like it's too good to be true, but it's true. So it's a lot of fun.
All right. Chad and Dan, thanks so much for joining us on the Technology Pulse. We really appreciated having you on, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Be happy to do it. Look forward to it, Rick.
Same here. Had a great time. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you for listening to the Technology Pulse podcast produced by DALY. Before we go, we would like to remind you of a few legal considerations. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of DALY or its leadership. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide legal, financial, or other professional advice. The content of this podcast is protected by copyright laws and may not be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted without the written permission of DALY Computers Inc. Any products, services, or other references mentioned in this podcast are for informational purposes only and do not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by DALY. Thank you again for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us at marketing@daly.com.